The Rothschild family began to make its fortune in the late 1700s, from sort of 1760 in the German city of Frankfurt. Mayer Rothschild was a financier, and he was very successful in being able to actually pass on huge amounts of that wealth to 5 sons. Those sons were placed in cities around Europe, prominent places, that began a kind of banking empire. The Rothschilds were very successful. They did become very wealthy, particularly through the 19th century. And so the myth attached to them that they were therefore controlling world events. So the original source for the Rothschild conspiracy is from 1846 with a pamphlet written by a Frenchman called Georges d'Enville under a pseudonym called Satan. Now this conspiracy theory then began by asserting some 30 years after the event that at the Battle of Waterloo, a man called Nathan Rothschild, a prominent European banker living in London, had been at the Battle of Waterloo and, knowing which way the battle was going, hired a chain of horses to rush to the Belgian coast, hired a fisherman to take him across stormy seas, more coaches to London where he could, on the stock exchange, make a killing, make a huge amount of vast fortune. Now this document, as I say, some 30 years after the event itself, is the only real source we have of this alleged conspiracy by Rothschild, and it falls apart as soon as you start looking at the actual historical record. So Nathan Rothschild wasn't at the Battle of Waterloo, there was no storm in the English Channel, he didn't make a vast killing on the stock market on that day. But this notion that Rothschild family then controlled world events is of course a myth, it's a conspiracy. And why the Rothschilds? Basically because they're Jewish. So this was written by an anti-Semite who saw the world through the lens of vast Jewish conspiracy, and the Rothschilds were a convenient or very prominent family that could be ascribed to. Jews had been blamed by their Christian neighbours in Europe for all sorts of calamities and disasters throughout the Middle Ages and into the modern period. This was something which stretches back into early Christian theology, blaming Jews for the murder of Christ, when of course it was the Romans that crucified Jesus. So there's a tradition of suspicion, of hostility, of animosity towards their Jewish neighbours. In the early 20th century, originating in Tsarist Russia, a pamphlet which has become known as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was published, which claimed that a small group of Jewish leaders were plotting to control the world, conspiring against the established order, and would seek to undermine traditional forms, traditional societies, and seize power for themselves. Hitler and the Nazis were very taken by this theory, as were many others. In the aftermath of the Great War, when Germany had to try to come to terms with its defeat by the Allied powers, a convenient myth became that Jews had conspired to destroy Germany from within, that they had stabbed Germany in the back. So anti-Semitism became something which the German National Socialist Party thrived upon. So I think there is certainly, in times of social upheaval, national catastrophe, economic anxiety, you will see conspiracy theories thrive. I think these things have become even more pronounced, perhaps through social media. With the coronavirus, there is a myth that Jews have either manufactured the virus or will be using the vaccine when it's eventually available to murder huge numbers of people around the world. This is a crazy myth, of course, that the vaccine itself will be lethal, and that this will be a way of enslaving the survivors through microchipping them, being able to control and track them, and this is supposed to be part of a plan, a plot for a new world order. Of course, there is absolutely no evidence for any of this. Conspiracy theories are harmful in at least three significant ways. Firstly, they harm those that they target, in this case, Jews with the anti-Semitic myths. They also harm those people that hold those views because they don't understand the complex world that they're living in, and they also harm those of us in the wider society because they undermine authorities of truth. There are no simple answers to this. I think, though, the heart of it must be education. Too much of education has probably in the past been about simple explanations of very complex problems. I think we have to give more attendance to how we know what we know about the world, about the past, how we use sources, how we use evidence, how we can weigh different truth claims, and perhaps that can give us a path through the kinds of myths that have been circulating for so many generations.